talk about sports addictions. So it's important to talk about this because parents can go off the deep end if their team loses. Now, there's even a correlation between spousal abuse and a favorite team taking a loss. And that is going to affect you and your kids adversely. Now, here's what our old friend Google AI has to say. Research suggests a correlation between a favorite sports team losing and increased incidence of spousal abuse, particularly after unexpected or upset losses. This is not to say that losing a game causes abuse, but rather that it can be a trigger for individuals who are already predisposed to violence. Now, several factors can contribute to this phenomenon. Emotional arousal, we get upset when our team loses. This is natural. Alcohol consumption, there's a lot of drinking that goes on during a football game. Pre-existing conditions, individuals with a history of aggression, anger management issues, or those who have witnessed or experienced domestic violence themselves may be more vulnerable to reacting violently to a sports loss. And normalization of aggression. Sports, like football, tend to normalize aggression. Now, I still watch sports, but I watched much more when I was a kid, probably too much. You might say that I was a full-fledged nut when I was a teenager and young man. I didn't intend for it to be that way, it just sort of happened. And maybe that has happened to you. Now, when I was a boy, I was a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and that was because I grew up in the Philadelphia area. At the same time, I was undergoing family stress, and so I was in a very vulnerable position. Perhaps to alleviate tension, anxiety, and uncertainty in my life, I gravitated toward what I call savior seeking. I can't think of a better term for it. It's where you look for salvation in an external entity, such as a sports team or sports figure. Now, unfortunately, at the time, the Philadelphia Eagles weren't any good. In fact, none of the Philadelphia sports teams were until the Flyers came along. Nevertheless, like many people in my area, I became emotionally invested in these teams. Because I was in a vulnerable position, I invested myself more than I should have. And I think this was damaging to me. As a matter of fact, I know it was damaging to me. In my mind, if the Eagles won, I won. If the Eagles lost, I lost. And the Eagles lost a lot in those days. They would regularly get the tar beat out of them by the Dallas Cowboys. I would get really angry when watching a game, and I would scream at the television and throw things. Now, this isn't healthy. It wasn't healthy for me, and it's not healthy for you if you're doing this. You can see many videos on YouTube today where people break television sets because their team loses. Now, this isn't healthy. Now, I had to conquer this by walking away from sports, and I did this for decades until I could approach sports in a more mature, rational manner. Now, when I view sports as casual entertainment. But I still see many people who get emotionally invested in sports, and I try to gently counsel them, if the opportunity arises and it seems appropriate. Now, since I live in a Dallas Cowboys catchment area, God often dispenses cruel justice. I tell these fans of the Dallas Cowboys that when the Dallas Cowboys win, they win. You don't win. When the Dallas Cowboys lose, they lose. You don't lose. The Dallas Cowboys aren't going to give you a cut of their paycheck when they win. Furthermore, it's senseless to invest your ego and emotional energy in a team that isn't performing well. Like now, in 2025, Dallas is having problems. Now, it doesn't make any sense to invest your ego in poor teams. You're just cruising for a bruising. You can be happy if the home team wins, but to go off the deep end when they lose doesn't make any sense. I use the restaurant industry as an example. Now, hear me out here. Suppose there's a restaurant in your hometown that had horrible food, lousy service, lousy atmosphere, and they treated you like garbage at a price that was exorbitant. Now, further suppose that there's a restaurant 10 miles away that has great food, great service, great atmosphere, and they treat you like a king at a reasonable price. Which restaurant are you going to go to? Well, you might support the local restaurant a few times just to be a good sport about it, but probably you would gravitate toward the better restaurant. Well, if you're going to do that with restaurants, why don't you do it with sports teams? Why root for a home team that couldn't care less about you? The point is to not go off the deep end with regard to sports. Don't let your attachment to a team control you. Now, I see many adults who behave like this today. A few years ago, I was in the Philly airport and I saw this adult man go off the deep end because the Eagles were losing. He was slamming the table and yelling at the TV, and not in a humorous way. I don't think that's healthy for the soul. And if you're one of these people who behaves like this, you're doing tremendous damage to yourself and to your kids. And your kids are going to learn this non-productive behavior off you. The message is this: sports is entertainment, the purpose of which is to take us to a better place. It's supposed to relax us. If you find yourself regularly screaming like a nut at the television in a malignant way, it's time to do something else. Okay, as I told you, I was a big Flyers fan back in the day. These were the glory days of the Flyers when they were winning the Stanley Cup. Now, I think this story takes place in 1972, 1 year prior to them winning the Cup. So as I was watching television in our recreation room downstairs, the Flyers were in a close game in the playoffs, and naturally I wanted them to win. Well, our laundry room was at the other end of the rec room, and my mother was doing clothes. So you know how it is in a tight game. You need to have everything working for you. It's all hands on deck. And I had determined that my mother was a jinx. So when she came out of the laundry room, I started screaming at her to get the hell out of this room, or else the other team is going to score. And I went on and on, chewing her out. And she just stands there with the laundry, and she's just looking at me in stunned silence. And then finally she looks at me and she says, "You are a nut." And she was right about that. I was a nut, but those days are gone. Thank you.